Hi everyone, this is Nasli. Today we'll be discussing the effects of leadership on innovation, focusing on an executive brief from the Advanced Institute of Management, which is a research initiative from multiple academic councils out of the UK. So the purpose of their brief was to answer 5 key questions around innovation and leadership, which led them to develop a leadership for innovation framework, which we'll take a look at later. The questions are: how does leadership affect innovation? What does leadership in the context of innovation mean? Is there such a thing as inspirational leadership for innovation? Also, how does leadership affect the organizational context that fosters innovation? And what sort of organizational contexts are necessary to generate innovation? Firstly, they looked at the various leadership theories in literature, which they categorized into the 2 roles of leadership they considered as the motivator and the architect. So the majority of the literature was based around the motivator, which has to do with the leader's behavior or the social and psychological processes. These included the trait and style leaderships, the contingency leadership, transformational or transactional leadership, and also distributed leadership. The second one, which is the organizational architect, is the structuralist leadership styles, which was to do with the leader's administrative tasks as opposed to their behavior. So it had to do with organizational design and resourcing and how they structured their sort of processes. So after looking at the literature on leadership, they looked at the literature on innovation, and they focused on the dimensions of innovation they thought would have a relationship with how leadership affected innovation. So these included the types of innovation: product, process, service, organizational, and market; the degree of innovation, so whether it was incremental or evolutionary, or whether it was radical or revolutionary; and then also the innovational enablers, which are structures, cultures, competencies, networks, processes, and systems. So their findings showed that the type of leadership role that you take is beneficial at different stages with different types. So at exploration and search stages, the leader as the motivator is more effective, whereas during the exploitation stages or commercialization and implementation, the leader as the organizational architect is more effective. And this was sort of similar to Tidden Besant's innovation energy concept that they had, where they had the leader as the moderator or the mediator. At the process level, they've also found a relationship between the degree of innovation and the type of leadership style. So for incremental innovation, a motivational leader would need to balance the transformational or transactional, and then a structuralist leader would need to emphasize on systems and processes. Whereas for radical innovation, the motivation leader would need to be transformational, and the structural leader would need to have emphasis on values, norms, beliefs, setting up culture and informal networks, for example. At the organizational level, they talk of the concept of ambidexterity. So basically the ability to balance between the degrees of novelty, or balance between the radical and incremental innovations. We're also presented with an example of AXA Insurance, whose leaders at a structural level had innovated rapidly by the introduction of an innovation department and introducing the Madhouse program. And then also on a motivational level, they communicated their innovation ambitions, I guess, through this use of a quadrant where they balanced and audited the radical and incremental innovations. Their innovation process model at AXA, which I haven't shown here, is very similar to our hybrid model discussed in class, from search and exploration with 7 cross-functional and cross-grade members, to selection by some assessors, to implementation and diffusion by a project team. And then it also includes like a feedback loop as well. So this is the framework that the AIM research team has come up with. The key takeaway for me, or the innovation energy sweet spots, were to realize that there are dual roles of the motivator and the organizational architect when it comes to leadership. And then also realize that transformational leadership styles is effective at early stages of the innovation process, whilst the more transactional leadership styles is more effective during implementation or exploitation. And there's also like a balance required in organizational design to support both the radical and incremental innovation, which is, to have ambidexterity to enable leadership selection and development based on the innovation stage that they're responsible for. Finally, they do discuss some further research areas to be explored. These include innovation barriers as well as enablers, the relationship between the leadership approach and the stage of innovation, and then also the concept of a distributed leadership, which is not well covered in literature at the moment. So this concludes my slideshow. Thank you for listening.